My name is Ras Oduno Tariq, aka Baba Tariq Oduno, aka Baba Oduno. I want to thank Ras Kwasi, the family, the Lion's Voice, and it is time appropriately for the Lions to tell our story, where our noble ancestors will be honored. And we know that we have not been a negligible factor in the history of our story in the world. Thank you very much. There is no culture without agriculture. And without agriculture, I don't even want to think about it. Peace.
What do you have to tell the people about Rastafari?
Light to the world. The king of kings and the conquering line of the tribe of Judah. Elected himself, first rightful ruler. Hey yo, Eli, hail them high, hail the black king on the 23rd of July. So tell them guy, who praise God up in the sky, it's a lie. The Almighty living on your night. From ancient time, them a try. Them Romans, now them just open them suit and ties. Criminals ain't got no alibi, they stole my people. Then them comes without them genocide.
Are you talking about slavery?
Them couldn't kill the lion we come conquer Judah tribe.
Who?
Go through tribulation, and I strive, see sufferation, and I still rise. That's why we tell them in America, live Rastafari in every ghetto area. We come to tell them in Toronto, straight at
In terms of no culture without agriculture, this is what the world knows you for. Where did that come from? What was the inspiration for you creating that phrase, which is now a global phrase, and a lot of people don't know it comes from Baba Oduno, but where does that come from?
It came from my grandparents. It also came from, I got a little bit concerned about the consciousness of the Kushite, the Basuna, the Mawozi, the Yoruba community, and other communities. They put certain cultural contexts more predominantly ahead of going to the earth to feed ourselves. And it would be remiss of me not to say, and I would be an outright reformist, not to mention the Nation of Islam and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The time after I evolved through the Evergreen Division number 50 in Seattle of the UNIA African Community League, I looked around, seeing which had an educational institution, and at that time, the whole late 69, 70, the Nation of Islam was the only one that had at least 25 schools of some sorts that were called Muhammad University of Islam. Now, some of these schools had the name or the label, but a few of the newer ones, they were basically nurseries growing into
A school.
Muhammad University of Islam. And so in Denver, Colorado, I was a teacher. September of 1971, I perhaps was right at the age of 25 years of age. I wasn't married. I certainly didn't have no children at that time. And so I worked at the Muhammad University of Islam. My coach, my teacher, Keith X. Bray, we left Seattle in June of 1971, and he was the director of Muhammad University of Islam. So I was a teacher there. We had about 30 students who were from the ages of about 5 to about 12 or 13. And so they could not afford to fund me, but they funded him.
Okay.
And even he was only funded at $400 a month.
Oh wow.
And he had been making $20,000 a year as an accredited teacher. in Seattle, Washington. And so they wanted to pay me $25. But guess what I told them? You take that $25 and you put it on the number 2 poor. The number 2 poor in the Nation of Islam. That was the donation to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I got me a job in the evening from 3 to 9 as a salesman in major appliances. And then I kind of worked my way into the community college so I could get some student aid. You know, we knew how to engineer, you know what I mean? So between the two of those, it buttressed to take care of my rent and take care of other things. And so I would not hope that on anyone to have to do that.
But then how did the phrase come about?
Huh?
How did the phrase, was it an epiphany that you had? There's no
Well, the
culture?
phrase is that Elijah Muhammad was always go to the earth
Okay.
to do something for
So
yourself.
it was inspired by Nation of Islam.
Well,
indirectly.
my grandparents,
Yes.
the Nation of Islam, George Washington Carver, knowing Psalms 24,
Mm.
earth is the Lord's and the
The
fullness
fullness
thereof,
thereof,
and
word.
they the world and they that dwell therein. Come on,
Okay,
home
okay,
girls.
okay.
So
Very powerful. All right. So, talk to me about the UNIA, how you became familiar with the Honorable Marcus Garvey when you became an official member, and then also from there, you know, when you became aware of Emperor Haile Selassie, Ethiopia, etc.
I would say it was probably somewhere in my 8th or 9th grade years. I grew up in 2 barbershops in Beaumont, Texas. One of the barbershops was my barbershop in what it was called the Negro Wall Street on Forsyth and Natchez and Wall and College Street. And so in the barbershop, you have a conglomeration of people coming through. And I probably heard of the name from a giant
Mm.
before Marcus Garvey because I heard of Jack Johnson,
Okay.
the boxer.
Okay.
And so Jack Johnson coming out of roughly 50 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico from Galveston Island.
Mm.
And so, you know how somebody would come through and say, well, you know, the people said the only people that we heard of in the world was Jack Johnson and Marcus Garvey. And so you would hear that, and what happened is that there were men and women, even though they didn't articulate the name, they articulated the practice.
Mm.
And it wasn't the practice of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey as I knew of in July of 1977. It was the practice of Booker T. Washington.
Mm.
Okay? It was the practice of Booker T. Washington because there were schools named after Booker T. Washington. Not a high school in Beaumont, Texas, but it was an elementary school. There were schools named after Mary McLeod Bethune.
Mm-hmm.
I attended Adams, which was named after an African descendant.
Mm-hmm.
I attended Paul Laurence Dunbar Junior High School. I also attended Charlton Pollard, which merged roughly in 1926. There were 3 high schools supposedly under the name. There was a Lucky, there was a Charlton, there was a Pollard. And the people who guided them was Professor Lucky from Prairie Review. Our first graduates from Charlton was the Charlton School, and it's almost impossible to talk about reading schools without talking about the spiritual houses.
Okay.
The spiritual house was Live Oak Baptist Church, which it's not unusual. The church is occupied more like Friday, Wednesday, Sunday. The other days of the week, they're open. So many of the people who were at Live Oak Baptist Church, some of them had gone to Prairie View, A&M, agriculture and mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them had gone to Wiley, agriculture and mechanical. And some of these schools had a little bit varied name when they started.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that people went to saying something to you like, well, you better check yourself. You're trying to act like Jack Johnson.
Mm.
You better check yourself. You know what I mean? You better stay in line. You're trying to act like Jack Johnson. And the code was, and it probably wasn't before I was, somewhere in the 9th on to the 10th grade, that I had heard of Jack Johnson when we were in elementary school. But the code evolved. And the code evolved was that Jack Johnson stood on his own, stood on his own foundation, and not only inside the boxing ring. Intellectually, also he's considered someone who made an innovation on the adjustable wrench. And to be disparagingly of Jack Johnson, these other people who classify themselves as white, a slice of them went to calling it the monkey wrench.
Yeah. One king of kings, one throne. Thrones of the house of the great King David. I and I the generation of them that seek him, that seek the high face, O Jah. So lift up your heads, O you Ethiopians, and be lifted up, O you ever live indoors, and let the king of Mount Zion yadi. Well, we are king, we're that crown. Stepping on the ring now, she won't back down. Ready for we a can fi stand our ground. Attack the black man and them get smacked down. She a queen, we're that crown. Stepping at the ring now, she won't back down. Ready for we a can fi stand our ground. Attack the black woman and them get smacked down. For combat, have to stand for the black. Stand against the beast when the beast come attack. When the beast send crack, try to tear us down. When the lion roar, everybody hear the sound in Babylon town. Wicked man going drown. Earthquake shake, all them bars will break. Well, here's a hot take. There's a brimstone lake. Somebody gotta pay for the choice they make. Yo, be careful what you say, cause some news is fake. And every crew got a stitch to watch the moves you make. Well, it's not Drake, but the song's still great. Give your truth and rights, ladies, move the way. Say yo,